Warning: Kingdom Death contains mature content, be it in its story themes and or its images. While while videos involving Kingdom Death Monster may not contain specifically mature content in them, the game does, and thus, if these videos generate interest for it, you've been warned that that is what it will lead to. If this does not bother you, please enjoy the video. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to this assembly video and painting video for Kingdom Death Monsters Before the Wall. This is my first Kingdom Death model, and also the first video in which I'm doing an assembly. I apologize for the fact that a lot of the assembly will be out of frame, but this and the first section of the painting video are me still getting used to keeping things in frame. So, this was a 14-piece model, counting the two separate round pieces for the base. The legs, I believe. The body was mostly whole, but for some reason, a lot of these models have the breasts as an entirely separate piece. The three that I have assembled so far have such. The sword, which I'll get onto that later, is a single piece with the hand on it. The shield, half the arm, which I believe was I can't remember if that was the shield arm or the sword arm, and then the skirt makes up two separate pieces, as well as the bottom part of the bottom part of the tabard being one, and the head being two. I did have a mistake while gluing this together. The skirt ends up matching up in the front very easily, but doesn't fit in the back if you do so. I had to actually tear it off. You can see the gap actually right there that ends up being created. Even after it gets taken off and put back on, I later needed to actually rip it off and putty the gap back in so that there wasn't a gap in the back. It's barely noticeable once painted, and unless you look real close, look at it real close. The shield was a massive pain, honestly. It wouldn't stay on, and then I still ended up popping it back off real quick before it dried thoroughly to end up making sure that it was more balanced correctly. The sword I got at the angle that I wanted very quickly. As you can see, there's where I popped the arm off. My issue with the sword is not anything from a work perspective. Yep, there's where I popped the skirt off for the first time. It's from a from a design perspective. I see this actually with a couple of Kingdom Death weapons that I've seen so far, where they don't hold the weapons all that decently. The fact that she's holding it from the bottom of the, I believe, hilt, the handle part, there's a lot of terminology on the bottom half of the sword. It kind of irks me a little. All weapons, you should hold them as close to the not the pommel, well, the brace area, which might actually be the hilt. I'm sorry, as possible. So here I am starting the painting, and for anybody who heard my last video, I basically do what I refer to as a slop base coat, where, as you can see, I just sloppily paint the model to get most of it done for a feel of progress and a sense of like or a feel of accomplishment and a good sense of what I'm doing with it, as a lot of colors pretty easily get painted back over with this type of paint. But I'm doing the black primarily because that is actually majority of the model, well, at least the lower half, and still a good portion of the upper half. All the cloth she is wearing, except the tabard, is black, and so are her boots, at least on the exterior. I did do the interior folded down part a different color. We'll get to that later. So this is everything except for the ends of the sleeves, which I didn't realize weren't part of the actual armor from the upper arms. It becomes more clear later. Oh, and the skirt, of course, isn't, which I'm doing now as a very dark gray, probably the darkest I have. This will also be the same color that I end up using for the base. There were multiple parts of painting the skirt that I forgot the interior as well, so I probably will end up going back to this. But I thought that this was the best color to use, considering I wanted it to turn out lighter, but I always like to start with darker with this paint style. As I said, here's the underside, and then eventually I get around to the other side. Aid. I did not remember to do the top part of the skirt that's above the belt for quite some time into the model. I think just before I was done with the base coat before needing to do all the touch-ups. I do believe I touch on that at a certain point. But, so for the most part, this model was actually really nice. It still makes me question warrior and heels kind of stuff, but whatever. Um, I liked the decency of the face sculpting, the shield and weapon themselves, separate from how the weapon is held, is nice. And yes, the blade is intentionally black. I did some research into it, and here's me painting the base itself. I did speed this up further, as I do also with the black rim of the base that I do later. I did some research into what she's actually holding, and I believe she's holding um, the iron shield or whatever it's referred to as when you melt down the lanterns, and the sword is the black sword from the Gorm set. That took a lot longer to find, as I don't actually have the game yet. So here I go on to a mid-range metal. Well, that I primarily use for the armor. I believe this is also what I end up using for the belt buckles on, well, the belt itself, but also the one on each boot. I use this for the entire part of the upper body armor. The shield is done separately, and the crossguard of the sword is a brighter. Right, the shield is darker and the crossguard is lighter. It makes highlighting that a bit of a pain. But this ends up being, I think, the second most used color on the model. Definitely the most used on the upper body itself, not counting the shield. The shield itself probably uses more, but it's also just a large, practically flat surface area, where the back is actually flat, and the rings end up being the same. I ended up painting the same color. I made a late decision to actually paint some black into the rings themselves to make it look like that they weren't just solid chunks of metal. And yeah, here I go with the lighter metallic. I have three shades of metal on the model, which are the three that I actually own. I've been tempted to try to find a different shade, but I'm fine with that. I think here I'm touching up some of the armor, or probably getting some of the sleeves. There were a lot of moments of needing to cut out here because I, for some reason, ended up stomping a lot. Apologize for the out of frame part. This is still that this is still that first section of painting. I do much better with my rig after this. Um, this is primarily what I ended up doing for just the this section of the model, but I get more into the colors later. This model gets actually far more vibrant. So next I move on to the shield, which, while it appears that the surface area gets covered very quickly, this specific dark metallic I have has become very watered down over time, and it needs multiple coats, else it looks like else it acts just like a wash. Uh, for those that don't understand or don't know, a wash in terms of painting models would be a color that is far more watered down and is literally just intended to wash over the model and sink into the recesses. The most often used wash is just a black quote unquote ink wash, where most of the time it's just watered down paint, not actual ink. The I think it took two or three coats to get that done right. Here I end up painting the actual handle or the hilt of the sword a very light gray. Um, I believe a mid-range grade for what I have. And then for the interior of the boots that's turned down, I ended up using a bone-like color. It's actually GW's bleach bone color. And I thought that would be best after it gets highlighted white later on, but yeah. Also here you can see the fact that I didn't get the entire uh, upper body clothing black. That's not the top of the skirt. That's actually the body itself. You can see the white ring around. I think this is around when I realized it was there. I do get that covered up later, though. Next, I go on to painting the face. This took multiple layers for any parts of the flesh, but not, I think only two. I think maybe three in some parts because a lot of it was already black due to painting sloppily. The hair was a bit of a pain to paint around. I had to multiple times repaint the hair or repaint the face because I would paint one and then paint over to the other. The I did not remember to do the flesh of the legs though until later. I move on to the tabard, which I use a very dark blood red, almost dried blood. I actually used this once to paint up a model. Well, this watered down version of this mixed with brown to paint actual dried blood onto stuff. The tabard itself wasn't too hard. I just needed to go across easily. The model itself, as you can see, is on a different base because somewhere around here it stopped sticking to the paint pot that I was using as a holder. And I end up using the same red for the hair itself. I was hoping to get a better dry brush onto it later, but it doesn't really come out too well. But the hair still stands out compared to the black ink wash that gets put over later. But as you can see, sloppily, even with a smaller brush than I was originally using, doesn't avoid the face too much. The bigger issue with getting the face was there was a black collar of the outfit, and fighting between the border of that and the actual face was a bit of a pain, as that went almost all the way up to her chin. The hair had a lot of recesses that needed to be done, and the underside was also a bit of a pain while avoiding the rest of the model. I end up actually splashing some red onto the back of the armor, which does get painted over later. But lots of red hair. Double touching up the tabard because parts of it were black and needed to put a second layer on to make sure that I got it right. I also did that with the hair later. And this is when I remember to actually do the legs. There were definitely at least two coats of this because, as you can see, it was not all that, flesh-like. It was more gray and everything to begin with. The backside, I needed to paint over the entire thing, but her outfit, while a unitard, I believe would be the term, basically has a thong going across the back, and I just acknowledged that it would be far easier to repaint the thong like area uh, on its own and just go hog wild with the flesh down there. I did use a darker tone of flesh as I wanted her to look pale, but I didn't want her to look ghostly pale, so I, wanted to first paint on a darker or the darker tone and then dry brush to a lighter one. Most of the models that I will paint for this game will be of a pale tone, as it is, while I don't know the lore of the setting, it is a sunless setting. There is no natural light, really. Every light is either a monster trying to lure things, a really rare occurrence, or a lantern of some sort. And yeah, so by that argument, skin tones should be very pale. There are some occasions in the art where people are of alternate skin tones, be that even more pale or of darker skin tones. But the argument goes that the reason, there is a reason models in this setting should be pale, just like how there's an argument in the Witcher setting, be that the book or the books or the games. Most of the people there should be pale as well, but that's due to the region of the world in which the story is based off of. I'm doing a lot of touch-ups with the black here, primarily covering up the boots, getting any place where I splashed over the bottom of the actual boots themselves, and where I went too much on the base. Getting under that one boot where both the foot and the heel are on the bottom was a bit of a pain. Oh, yep, this is where I cover up the inside of the actual outfit that's underneath the skirt. And from here I end up touching up a couple different areas. I think I tried getting the underside height of the armor, or like where the black cloth is. I did have to move to a smaller brush. And here I end up touching up the face, primarily that collar part that I was referring to earlier, but I believe this is also, nope, this is where I do the second coat of the legs, trying not to paint over the thong, which, as you can see, I had already painted. The her right leg was a little odd because it was more just a triangle between the stocking, skirt, and tabard of just flesh. And then this is where I actually go to paint in the eyes. I didn't do the pupils on camera, as it's one of the small details like the belt buckle that I wait till off camera to do. And then here I do the base itself. I believe before I did the eyes, I don't know if the frame was caught, the few frames were caught during the actual um, frame rate increase, but I did end up painting the lips, which I needed to paint later. So here I'm doing the ink wash, and I'm just primarily doing that over the entire model in order to darken the model, show the recesses better. But if you look, I did actually touch up the model in between the last part before the ink wash and the actual ink wash itself. I ended up adding the pupils. So I'm actually holding the model on the color I used for that. They're a very dark green. The belt buckle, touched up a few other areas, made sure the face was done right. But the ink wash, it just, boop, done. Then I move on to the dry brushing, and I first started with the skirt, which I believe I did 2 attempts at, and then used the lighter gray or a white, that whatever I ended up putting on the actual hilt itself. For dry brushing so that it would stand out more. Also, I had to be careful with the ink wash not to let it pool in actually the skirt of all places. So here I go with the shield. The sword, I did end up dry brushing a metallic because I still wanted to look like metal, while the rest of the black parts of the outfit I did with gray, as I'm currently doing. I was debating using a gloss varnish on the boots themselves, but I decided against it. I didn't want it to be too bright, or as too standoutish compared to the rest of the model, especially the metal. And here I'm mainly dry brushing, I think, the armor itself, yes, and also the sword, which I just the crossguard of the sword, I ended up dry brushing the exact color it was based as, but with the ink wash, it still helped make things stand out. I believe this is when I'm dry brushing the face. I originally thought that I'd messed up her left eye, but fortunately it came out just fine in the after the varnish. It ended up clearing up whatever gunk was there, so it's actually visible instead of slightly cloudy around the whole thing. And then obviously this is where I'm doing the under part of the skirt, her legs specifically. I think I ended up not doing the actual underside of the skirt till later by accident. Here I'm dry brushing the interior of the boots that's again turned down. I ended up getting part on the stockings, but I repainted that later just before varnishing. I actually wasn't too pleased with how the dry brushing of the hair turned out. It's barely noticeable in my opinion. I would have preferred the hair being a little bit more vibrant. It worked fine on the tabard, which I later tried to, the art card that comes with this has a filigree, I believe is the term, on the tabard itself, but I found that it was too difficult to do. And here we are at the end, actually. So I just dry brushed it gold. You can actually see that here if you look carefully. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to press the like button. If you didn't, go ahead and press that dislike button. I don't mind, but please try to leave a constructive comment. As for if you want to leave a comment in general, go for it. If not, whatever. And if you want to see more like this, being more painting videos, or more unboxing, or more Let's Plays, especially if you want to see some more Kingdom Death, as I will be getting almost the entire game over the next few years from their more recent Kickstarter. Although it will be a few months till I'll be able to start posting too much more of that. Feel free to subscribe. Regardless, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.